the 3 journalists at CNN were asked for their resignation.
Yeah.
That request was honored. They gave their resignation. One of them, a Pulitzer Prize winner who had worked there for over 20 years, and what it comes down to, is you didn't follow policy and how we cover things. Yesterday, I saw it written in a couple different places. A line from there's a 9 a.m. meeting that happens every morning, and it's kind of rare for a big company like that. The president of the company, Jeff Zucker, is on the call every morning, and it's weird because normally that's your worker bees.
Yeah.
Reporters who are all over the world are on there, and different editors are on there, so you can kind of talk about, okay, here's what we have going on today. Whether it's planning for inauguration coverage, whether it's planning for, when I was still there, it was Ferguson. So you'd have these 2-hour meetings where it was like, okay, the police are telling us to expect violence.
Yeah.
Here's where we're going to be, and here's where your security is. It's a game planning meeting. Anyway, well, yesterday, apparently Jeff Zucker, who was not too happy about how this Russia story was covered, and you know what? He shouldn't be because, here's how anonymous sources work. People call even here all the time and say, look, I can tell you about this, but I can't speak out on it. I can't put my name to it. So then, your journalists here at KPEL go to work. And, you might tell us something you heard. Well, then we have contacts who we can call, who can talk on the record and could call. That's the function of the Trooper Brooks Davids of the world and Corporal Carl Ratcliffe. We call and say, hey, someone called us. Is this true? Yeah. And you know what? A lot of times they say, no, that's actually a rumor. And then we can say, okay, calm down, everyone. That's not true.
Yeah.
So anyway, apparently what he said was, here's the deal. Our credibility is everything. And if you don't play by the rules, you will not work here. And which says a lot. I mean, there are probably 500 people on this phone call. And so I would imagine as you start doing your work for the day, you don't listen to everything someone has to say.
I'm curious what are
your thoughts?
Well, I was about to say, I'm curious what he means by playing by the rules. I look at it and I wonder, okay, if there's these 3 that have been caught, is it more than just these 3, or if these 3 just kind of like the scapegoats?
Well, you know what? It did come up yesterday in the press briefing, which actually got pretty heated with Sarah Huckabee Sanders, with someone asking, so would you want every news outlet to go back and look at all of their Trump-Russia stories and look at who the sourcing is, because there are a lot of, even when I was there was a thing called the row, and the row was like this. It literally was a row of people in the newsroom where if you wrote a story, it had to go through them all. And they all had to say, okay, your source may not be published, but they see who it is. They know who it is. It seems as if this story, which was funny, it never even showed up on TV, probably because the producers didn't want to go with it. It never showed up on TV. It was just on CNN.com. Yeah. So our friend Greg Adams up in Shreveport does a show for KEEL, AM and FM up in Shreveport. I was listening to his show last night because, look, that's what I do for you guys. I listen all over the place to kind of get, I want to know what the Shreveport people think about the legislature too. And if they're as unhappy with their representatives as we are sometimes, and obviously what's going on in New Orleans, it's a very different picture. It's almost like its own state. Yeah. So I listened last night, and I actually had to start recording on a segment because I think this makes the most sense. And like I said, full disclosure, it is hard for me to analyze this only because I've worked there. I mean, sometimes you see how the cooking's done in the kitchen. You have a much different view of a restaurant, and that sort of thing. So take a listen to this. This is the Greg Adams Show from KEEL in Shreveport up at 7:10 a.m. KEEL. His thoughts on these CNN firings.
This is an attack on the term fake news. I am happy about this story. I know a lot of people are happy. There are some people who are not happy about this story. There are people who want to read sideways into this, and I really don't want to do that. What I want to do is I want to look at the fact that CNN admitted to putting up a story on their website through their publications that was not vetted, that was not cited, that was as close to fake news as you can probably get without saying that Samuel L. Jackson's moving to Shreveport. Those stories are on the internet. You've seen them on social media. None of them are true. Don't worry about it anytime you see that. Taylor Swift isn't getting a house out on Cross Lake. That's just not happening. Facebook will tell you it's happening, but it's not happening. This story, on the other hand, this is CNN actually saying, look, this story about Anthony Scaramucci, we had one flimsy source. We absolutely should not have gone to publish this, but we did. And here's what CNN does after they've figured this out. First of all, they retracted it. They pulled it down. They said this does not meet the standards. We will not stand by this. Then today, they got the resignations of Thomas Frank, the writer of the piece, Eric Littbaugh, the editor, and Lex Harris, the overseer of this department. All three have resigned. We're talking about Pulitzer Prize winners and a Pulitzer finalist gone from CNN over this story and its inaccuracies. This is pivotal in what we've been experiencing over the last 24 months or so in our news cycles and in our political climate. As a guy who sits behind a microphone, who sits behind a keyboard, writes and delivers news, I always cringe a little bit when somebody uses the term fake news, because that term alone is an indictment, or at least kind of a semi-attack on me and my profession. There are people out there who deal in the business of fake news. That's what they do. They try to get the clicks at any cost. And unfortunately, a lot of us who actually put the effort and the work into it start to get lumped into these people. So for me, right now, today is a victory lap, because you have an example of a mainstream media source who had a bad story, a borderline fake news. It was fake news. They had a fake news story up on their website. They retracted it. They got the resignations for the people who were responsible for putting it up. This should be a victory lap for all of us. Again, don't read sideways into this. Don't try to turn this into something it's not, because you have a victory in your hands. You have something tangible. But if we try to manipulate this and try to turn this into a story that it's not, then we start to lose what we've gained. What we have gained is a little bit of stability, a shot across the bow. Whether it be mainstream media, whether it be local media, media in general needs to look at this and say, if CNN is willing to fire a Pulitzer Prize winner over a story that had bad sources, a story that was, and this is what I'm talking about. Don't try to twist this and say that because the story was critical of the president, they needed to be removed. That's not what this is. This is just a bad story. I would hope that CNN would take the same stance on this kind of thing if it were not the president.
So, very interesting take. Your thoughts, Brandon?
I want to meet this dude and tell him, like, amen. Thank you.
Greg Adams, you're welcome to come on down to Lafayette. We'll have a little meet and greet with you.
We'll interview him on offsides. Why not?
It's hard. You know what? It's a hard topic.
Yeah.
Because, it's so easy to say, well, it's just shoddy. Or it's so easy to say, well, of course CNN would. Or, but whenever, his take on it was, okay, let's not get confused on things. Mm-hmm. Let's just say, this is a bad story, right, with bad sourcing, and you know what? Surprisingly, they did something about it. Mm-hmm. They're not the first and they're not the last news outlet to do a bad story. It's all about how you react to it. Mm-hmm. We had an unfortunate situation even here at KPEL where a wrong picture was submitted to us, right? Of someone who passed away, and let me tell you, the phone calls that flooded into my office mm-hmm. about how could such a mistake be made, and me as the manager, I'm going to say it shouldn't, mm-hmm. And I apologize. What can I do? We're only as good as the information we get, and if we get it from multiple places, whatever, it's going to happen. It's all in how you respond to it. It's mm-hmm. all in am I going to have a conversation with you, Brandon, as a manager, and say, look, we're better than that, and I will. Luckily, you've never done anything like that. But it's a whole different way of looking at this.
But I love how he addressed as well when he talked about the term fake news and how he takes it as an insult to what he does as well. Because it's absolutely true. I have not been a fan of the term fake news because it is an overgeneralization that a lot of people take as one member of the media represents all members of the media. There's times I've gotten on Facebook with people and said, look, when you put the media is doing this, well, there are many different levels to the media. There's a big difference between the national media and the local media. The local media, a lot of times, is at the ground level, just trying to get information out to you. And
sometimes they're just trying to get a story done for the day.
Exactly.
In 8 hours.
Yeah, and you'll have a situation like, okay, if you have coverage of a weather event that's put out there by someone in the national media, they may hype this thing up insanely crazy. We're at the local level. We're trying to get the information out to you, trying to warn you, and we may hear, well, you're hyping this thing up too much. You're overdriving it for ratings. We're not that desperate for ratings. We just want to get the information to you.
I always think the thing to me is always, you're not going to get the true story, or if it's not a favorable story, it's fake. Yeah. And I think that's the part where, the part that the media has played for so long was that there was going to be someone there whenever you went out on the campaign trail, or you're speaking to constituents and you say, oh, no, God, they were holding guns to my head in Baton Rouge, to agree to this sort of thing. And, I had to do it. You had the media who was there to say, that's not how it happened. You went in there and said you were willing to do a deal. And I think it's that usual, what is it, like accountability is what has made it. However, now when so many people believe, that term fake news, like you said, it's the same as clumping everyone together, is the same as clumping every story that's not favorable together by just dismissing it as that it's fake.
But it's easy to overgeneralize.
But there is some fake.
To put people
and there is fake.
Yeah.
It's out there. Unfortunately, I think we classify things as fake just a little bit too often. But hey, thanks to our friend Greg Adams up in Shreveport, KEEL, AM and FM. You know what? You should reach out to him. I'll give him your phone number. Cool. I think he'd be a great conversation on offsides. Yeah, because it's hard to wrap your head around, and you kind of have to have your tunnel vision to say, okay, let's just look at this for what it is. Yeah. Let's not look at everything else. Let's not think about our opinion of a certain outlet from over the last 2 years. Yes. Let's just say, in this instance, which is all we're saying, this instance, kudos for getting rid of them. If it doesn't live up to your standards, just like if you're, it doesn't matter what you do. If you own a restaurant, if the food is not coming out of the kitchen the way you want it to, then you got to change things up. If you're not willing to make it the way I want to make it, because it's my restaurant, but you're not going to be here.
I will say this, though, Rob. If going forward, though, CNN continues to go so heavy anti-Trump, and it appears even more that the bias is still there, I don't think this is going to matter at the end of the day to people.
I still think it comes down to the sources. And unfortunately, in the world that we live in, you're not going to get away from unnamed sources, because most information comes from people who can't tell you.
Well, and that was the thing about all this, too. When President Trump came out and said, and look, I get why he's upset because they're attacking him. But when he says, if you can't use unnamed sources, well, unnamed sources have been used all the time. I mean, we've gotten some of our best information from unnamed sources.
Don't use unnamed sources. Yeah. But I would challenge someone to call around, especially when you're dealing with kind of a litigious story or allegations. People don't want their name out there because of retribution, fear of retribution. So anyway, it's a big conversation. Happy to have it here with you, Brandon. I'm sure it'll continue.